Hey everybody, I just want to give you a brief tutorial on how to start seeds indoors. It's March. You can actually get started in February planting seeds inside, and not everything is good to plant as a start inside and then transplant outdoors. There are some seeds that are best planted directly outdoors, just calling direct sow. And so the things that we're going to plant inside are crops that need like a longer growing season than we really have here. So a lot of nightshade family plants like tomatoes and peppers, eggplants, some of the cucumber family plants. So yeah, like cucumber and squashes. You can also do as starts, although they really can go directly into the ground. So I focus and try to get the most bang for my buck by doing mostly tomatoes inside because they're so delicious, but they take so long to grow because they're really Mediterranean plants. They're not meant for our climate, so we have to force them to grow here. So when I choose seeds, I like to choose usually heirloom varieties that are, things that you can't normally buy at the grocery store. They're not mass produced. So there is an heirloom tomato called Brandywine that is just like a nice reddish orange and delicious for slicing. It has a slightly spicy flavor, also sweet and rich, but it's not a heavy yielder. So there's not a whole lot of them. There's just these really large, like 7-inch tomatoes and a few of them on each plant. Labeling is really, really important. And I love teaching high school, but man, are we bad at labeling plants, which kind of sucks because then it comes time to sell them at like a plant sale. And if it's just a random miscellaneous tomato, mystery tomato, you really can't charge as much for it and really what it deserves. So I'm labeling each of I actually buy these in bulk and I don't like to use plastic a lot, so I cut them in half. And I'm labeling it with a pencil because that actually won't wash off when I water my plants. And every time I transfer the tomato seedling to a bigger pot, this label is gonna go with it. So I'm gonna put, it's just like a normal crop name. So this is a tomato, which I always spell wrong. There's no E at the end, but potato there is, I don't know. And then on the back, I'm going to put its variety name. So this is Brandywine. So all the tomatoes are actually the same species. It's just they have these different varieties. So any of them can actually interbreed, but we select for traits that we really like. There it is. Brandywine tomato. Our eyes are always bigger than our greenhouse. It's really hard not to overplant because each one of these individual cells is going to get potted out into a 4-inch pot and then a gallon pot, which are really big. So you really don't have that much space in our tiny little greenhouse. But it's okay to overplant a little bit because some of these seedlings are not gonna make it to their final gallon pot size. And they don't all get potted out that much. Just tomatoes, you plant out usually to a gallon pot before you put them in your garden because you don't plant them in the garden until later, like June. Yeah. So the first time that I started seeds indoors, I was living in an RV. Just like getting started in Washington State, and I had never actually done seeds inside before. So I had a garden growing up in Pennsylvania, but had never started plants inside. And I didn't know that light, I knew they needed light, right? Like plants need lights to grow, but I didn't realize how much light. So this is a pretty good setup. It's a full spectrum LED, which are pretty expensive, but pretty worth it. You can also get away with cool fluorescent lights. They just don't have as much of the light spectrum, like the visible light spectrum. And then it's pretty close to my plants, so it's actually recommended that they're about 2 inches from the tops of the starts. And then I have it on chains so that I can move it up as the plants grow. And this is a double tray system, so I have 2 trays stacked into each other. The bottom tray does not drain. The top tray has little holes in it so that it does drain. And when I water it, some of that water will get trapped in the bottom tray and kind of also rehydrate the cell from the bottom, which is really nice.
So the soil that I'm using here is just, it's a pre-made seedling mix. Sometimes I make my own, but I was just kind of crunched for time this year. So this is probably peat moss, which I'd actually rather use coconut coir because it's a more sustainable substance. It looks like it's just mixed with perlite, which is like a tiny little puffed up volcanic rock that adds air and water space. So the peat moss or the coconut coir is really good for holding on to moisture, which seeds need to germinate and also plants need to grow. And then the perlite just adds pore space. There might also be a little bit of fertilizer in here, so maybe like a tiny bit of compost that's been really finely screened and mixed in. Because our seedlings don't need a ton of nutrients right off the bat because they have those stored nutrients in the cotyledon of the seed. But as they grow, I'm gonna have to start fertilizing them, and the way that I'm gonna do it is add some worm tea from my worm compost bin. See episode 2, Nature Stuff with Q. And worm tea has like a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, like those needed nutrients for the actual seedling as it grows. A couple other things about my setup. I have the light connected to a timer so that I can't forget, right? So that it's just automatic. It turns on at 7 a.m. and turns off at 7 p.m. So the plants are gonna get 12 hours of sunlight, which they don't need the light until they've actually like germinated up through the soil. Some seeds need light to germinate, but most don't. And so I could turn this off until they actually start sprouting. And then underneath the seedling tray, I have a heating mat that not all seeds need to germinate, but tomatoes, they like it hot, hot, hot. So they want a germination temperature, let's see if it says it on the back. So temperature, 70 to 90 degrees. So depth, 1/4 inch. So spacing, 2 seeds per pot. So start indoors. Variety, you can save these seeds. So we want to plant them 6 to 8 weeks before the average last frost date, which I'd have to look up for Olympia, but this March time is pretty safe to plant them. And now for the planting. All right, I've got everything I need, my pre-made labels, so I can't forget that if I'm rushed. My seed packet is open and I have some sprinkled into my hand. Look how tiny. Wow, I'm just so amazed by these little seeds. Every single one has everything that it needs to become this giant tomato plant. This thing right here, so much potential. Okay, we're not gonna get into the nerdy, sciencey part of the seeds. We're just here to do the practical starting of them. All right, so I'm gonna take my pencil, which is one of my ultimate handy tools in gardening, and I'm just gonna use the eraser end to make a 1/4 deep divot. And a lot of people, when they're first starting out, make the mistake of planting seedlings way too deep. So 1/4 of an inch is not really that far down. You can get a special tool that does this, but end of the pencil works fantastically. So I like to make all my spaces in my little 4-quadrant cell first, and then I'm going to put 2 seeds in each of those little divots, because one of them might not germinate, one of them might not make it. At a certain point in the seedling growth, I'll thin it out so there's only one. Gonna cover it up. I'm just gonna like squish it down slightly so that the seed is in contact with all the particles of the soil. And then I'm going to label it Brandywine. And I put it off to the corner so it doesn't impede the growth of my seedling. Done and done.